The note was folded in half, tucked beneath the sugar bowl where only I would reach for it. My daughter slid it across the table without looking at me. She kept her eyes on Marcus the entire time, laughing at something he said about the Toronto real estate market, nodding in all the right places. But her left hand had pushed that small square of paper exactly 3 inches toward my coffee mug, and when I palmed it into my lap, she didn't flinch. 31 years old and already better at this than most people I'd worked with in my entire career. I excused myself to use the washroom. Unfolded under the bathroom light, her handwriting was small and controlled, nothing like the looping cursive she'd used as a kid. "Dad, something's wrong. Don't sign anything, please." I folded it back up, tucked it into my shirt pocket, flushed the toilet for good measure, and walked back out to the dining room table, where Marcus Holt was refilling my wife's wine glass and telling her she had remarkable taste. I sat down and smiled at him. He had no idea who he was dealing with. "My name is Douglas Fairweather. I'm 64 years old. I spent 26 years with the Canada Revenue Agency's Criminal Investigations Program, the branch that doesn't send you letters, the branch that shows up. I investigated tax fraud, money laundering, Ponzi schemes, shell companies, and every variation of financial predation you can imagine. I saw the inside of more federal courtrooms than I care to count. I testified as an expert witness 11 times. I retired at 58 with a full pension, a commendation I keep in a drawer somewhere, and a very particular set of instincts that my wife, Patricia, says make me exhausting at dinner parties. She's not wrong. I notice things. It's not something I can turn off. The way someone pauses before answering a simple question. The way a confident person touches their collar. The way a story that should be simple gets complicated in the telling. 26 years of watching people lie to my face will do that to you. Patricia and I have been married 38 years. We live in a house in Oakville, Ontario, that we've owned since 1991, paid off since 2009. We have 2 children. Our son, Robert, is 35 and lives in Vancouver with his family. Our daughter, Sophie, is 31 and lives 40 minutes away in Hamilton, where she works as a graphic designer, and, until 8 months ago, was married to a man named Trevor who turned out to have a gambling problem he'd hidden from her for 4 years. The divorce was quiet. Sophie handled it with a kind of steady dignity that made Patricia cry with pride and worry in equal measure. By October, Sophie was on her own for the first time in 6 years, navigating a 1-bedroom apartment and a bank account that the lawyers had managed to keep mostly intact, and doing what people do after their world gets reorganized without their permission, rebuilding slowly, carefully, one reasonable decision at a time. That's when she met Marcus. She brought him to Thanksgiving dinner at our house in October. Patricia had been cooking since the previous afternoon. Robert had flown in from Vancouver with his wife, Janet, and their 2 kids. The house smelled like roasting turkey, and the particular kind of warmth that only happens when everyone you love is under the same roof. And I was feeling, if I'm honest, the uncomplicated happiness of a man who has nothing to prove anymore. Marcus Holt arrived with a bottle of Bordeaux that cost more than it needed to, and a handshake that was calibrated to the millimeter firm without aggression, held exactly 1 beat longer than necessary, eye contact, steady and warm. He was 41. He had the kind of face that reads as trustworthy. Square jaw, easy smile, the slight weathering of someone who spends weekends outdoors. He was dressed in what I can only describe as expensive, casual, the kind of outfit that announces money without appearing to try. "Mr. Fairweather," he said, "Sophie has told me so much about you. I understand you worked in federal investigations?" "Tax work," I said. "Mostly numbers." "Fascinating," he said, and immediately turned to compliment Patricia on the table setting. I watched him move through my family for the next 2 hours. He was good, I'll give him that. He knew when to be funny and when to be serious. He asked Robert about his work in a way that seemed genuinely curious. He played with Robert's kids with the right amount of enthusiasm, engaged, but not performative. He helped clear plates without being asked. He called Patricia Mrs. Fairweather until she told him to call her Patricia, and then he smiled like the correction was a gift. Sophie watched him the whole evening with the careful eyes of someone who has been hurt before and is trying very hard to believe this time is different. It was when he poured the wine a second time that I noticed the first thing. He asked Patricia how long we'd owned the house. It was a casual question, dropped into a conversation about Oakville neighborhoods, The kind of thing a person might ask out of genuine curiosity. Patricia answered without hesitation since '91. She said, "We got lucky with the timing." Marcus nodded appreciatively, said something about how property values in that corridor had been extraordinary, and then, 2 minutes later, asked what we thought about downsizing. Not if we'd ever thought about it. What did we think about it? The presupposition was small. Most people wouldn't catch it, but I caught it because I spent 26 years listening to the architecture of how people ask questions, and what Marcus had just done was assume the answer before hearing it, then invite us to fill in the details. I gave him nothing. I said we were comfortable where we were. He moved on smoothly, and the conversation drifted toward dessert. Under the table, I turned the observation over in my mind like a stone. The note came during dessert. Sophie's hand, the sugar bowl, Dad. Something's wrong. Don't sign anything, please. After dinner, while Marcus helped Robert's kids find their coats, and Patricia made tea, Sophie found me in the kitchen alone for 45 seconds. "There's a term sheet," she said quietly. "He wants me to look it over this week. An investment opportunity. He says it's time-sensitive." "What kind?" "Real estate fund. Private placement. He says the minimum is 30,000. She paused. "He suggested I might want to ask you and Mom if you'd like in on it. He said older investors are the backbone of these kinds of funds." He used that exact phrase. "Older investors are the backbone." "Don't sign anything," I said. "I know. Don't show him any account statements, any property documents, anything with a number on it." She nodded, and Marcus walked back into the kitchen, asking if anyone wanted help with the pie. I waited until Patricia was asleep that night before I sat down at my desk. Marcus Holt. I started where I always started, the public record. It takes longer without a badge and a database, but it's remarkable how much a determined person can find with patience and the right search terms. His LinkedIn profile showed a company called Holt Capital Advisory, registered in 2019. Before that, 2 other firms, one in Calgary, one in Mississauga, that he'd listed as previous employers but framed vaguely. No specific titles, no dates that quite lined up. The Calgary firm, McAllister Wealth Partners, didn't have a website anymore. The domain had expired. I found a cached version through an archive service. It had been a small private investment advisory, 4 employees listed. Marcus wasn't one of the 4 listed publicly. The Mississauga firm, Clearpoint Financial Group, had a functioning website. I called their main number the next morning, introduced myself as a potential client, referred by a former associate, and asked if Marcus Holt was still with the firm. There was a pause. "Mr. Holt hasn't been with Clearpoint for approximately 3 years, the receptionist said. "I see. He'd been highly recommended. Do you know where he moved on to?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm afraid I can't provide information on former employees," she said carefully, "but I'd suggest confirming credentials with FRA before proceeding with any advisor. The Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario." She didn't have to say it twice. I called a former colleague from my CRA years, a woman named Beverly Okafor, who had moved into securities regulation and still owed me a favor from a case we'd worked together in 2014. I didn't ask her to do anything improper. I simply asked if she'd ever heard the name Marcus Holt in a professional context. She called me back in 4 hours. "Douglas," she said, "tell your daughter to be very careful." Beverly couldn't share file details, but she could confirm that Holt Capital Advisory had attracted 2 formal complaints to FSRA in the past 18 months, both from investors in their late 50s and early 60s, both involving a private real estate investment fund that had delivered none of its promised quarterly returns. The complaints were under review. No charges yet. These things move slowly. She also told me something that made the back of my neck go cold. Both complainants had been introduced to Marcus through younger family members he'd been in a relationship with. I sat with that for a while. Then I called Sophie. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. I've learned, in the long middle age of parenting adult children, that there is a difference between protecting someone and overriding them. Sophie had spent 6 years in a marriage where she wasn't taken seriously. I wasn't going to walk into her life and declare that she couldn't see what was in front of her. She needed to see it herself. She needed to be part of this. "I want to meet with him," I told her. "Just the 2 of us. Tell him I'm interested in the investment, that I've been looking to move some of my retirement savings into something with better returns." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "You're not actually going to invest anything," she said. It wasn't a question. "No." Another pause. "What did you find?" she asked. Enough to be careful. Not enough yet to take anywhere. Okay, she said. I'll set it up. Marcus suggested coffee at a place on King Street in Hamilton. I arrived 7 minutes early and chose a seat with a clear sightline to the door and the service counter. Old habits. He came in 2 minutes late, which was calculated late enough to seem busy, not late enough to be rude. He spotted me, smiled the warm smile, and ordered an Americano before sitting down. "Mr. Fairweather," he said. "Or Douglas, if that's all right?" "Douglas is fine. Sophie tells me you're curious about the Holt Capital Fund. I'm glad she mentioned it. Honestly, when I designed this vehicle, I had investors exactly like you in mind, people who've spent a career building real assets and want their savings working with the same discipline they applied to earning them. It was a good opening, flattering without being obvious. It validated the target without making them feel targeted. "Walk me through it," I said. He did. 15 minutes on a private real estate investment fund, supposedly acquiring undervalued commercial properties in secondary Ontario markets. Barrie, Kingston, Sudbury, projected annual returns of 9 to 11%. Minimum investment $30,000. Quarterly reporting. A 2-year lockup period. I asked the right questions in the wrong order, an old interview technique. You ask something sophisticated early, then something basic later, then sophisticated again. It disorganizes the rehearsed answers. The basic questions are where the gaps appear. "What's the fund's current NAV?" I asked. He gave me a number smoothly. "And the auditor?" Slight pause. "We're currently transitioning auditors. The documentation will reflect the new firm within 60 days. "What was the previous auditor?" "A smaller regional firm. We outgrew them." "The name?" "I'd have to get that to you in writing. I don't want to give you anything inaccurate." He smiled. "No auditor. No auditor means no independent verification. No independent verification means the numbers are whatever he says they are." I nodded like this satisfied me. Then I said, "I was talking to Beverly Okafor last week. Do you know Beverly? She's at FSRA now. Brilliant woman." I watched his face. Most people, when you drop a name they don't recognize, do one of two things. They say no, they don't know her, or they nod vaguely and move on. Marcus did neither. For exactly 2 seconds, his eyes went very still. Then the smile came back, slightly tighter than before. "I don't think our paths have crossed," he said. "Is she an investor?" "Old colleague," I said. "She speaks very highly of the regulatory work happening in private placement right now. Says it's a real moment of accountability for the sector." He picked up his coffee. His thumbnail was pressing into the side of the cup. "Absolutely," he said. "Transparency is everything in this business." We talked for another 20 minutes. I gave him nothing, no account figures, no indication of what I had or didn't have, no commitment. I told him I'd review the term sheet with my financial advisor before making any decisions. He left the coffee shop looking composed. I sat for a few minutes and finished my coffee. Then I called Beverly and told her what he'd said about the auditor. The week that followed was methodical. I've learned that the most important thing in any investigation is to build a foundation that doesn't depend on you, evidence that can stand without your testimony, records that speak for themselves. Sophie, to her enormous credit, handled her part with precision. She told Marcus she was still reviewing the term sheet and had some questions. She kept him engaged but non-committal, buying time. In the meantime, she quietly retrieved every message he'd sent her, referencing the investment, screenshotted the relevant conversations, and organized them into a folder she shared with me. There were things in those messages I hadn't anticipated. In early September, 6 weeks into their relationship, Marcus had begun asking Sophie about her divorce settlement, casual questions, framed as concern. By late September, he was asking specifically about her RRSP accounts, mentioning, in an offhand way, that he'd helped several clients optimize their registered savings through the fund. In early October, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, he'd sent her a message that read, "Your dad sounds like a sharp guy. Old school. Those are exactly the kinds of investors who understand real value. You should bring him into the conversation." He'd been planning to approach me since before he'd even met me. Sophie forwarded me that message without comment. I called her afterward, and she didn't say much. I didn't push. Sometimes the most important thing a parent can do is simply be present while their child processes a specific and painful kind of betrayal. "I feel stupid," she finally said. "You're not stupid," I said. "You're recovering from a hard year, and someone spent months, engineering your trust. Those are not the same thing. She was quiet. He's good at this, I said. That's the whole point. If it were easy to see, nobody would fall for it. Beverly connected us with a contact at the Ontario Securities Commission. I submitted a formal complaint with documentation. The term sheet, Sophie's messages, my own notes from the coffee meeting, the expired website of the Calgary firm, and the receptionist's indirect warning about verifying credentials. Beverly's team submitted their file separately. It's a bureaucratic process. I won't pretend otherwise. These things don't move with the speed that television suggests. But they move. 3 weeks after I filed, Sophie received a text from Marcus saying he needed to pause the relationship while he dealt with some professional matters. That was the entire message. No explanation, no apology. Just a door closing quietly. She texted me a screenshot with 2 words underneath. There it is. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I typed back, "I'm proud of you." She called instead of replying. We talked for almost an hour about Marcus, about Trevor, about the year she'd had, about how sometimes your life has to get rearranged before you can see which parts of it were load-bearing all along. Patricia joined the call partway through. Robert called from Vancouver to check in after Sophie texted him. It was an ordinary Thursday evening in November. All 4 of us on the phone at the same time. The way we hadn't been since Patricia's mother passed in 2021. Some things you only find by losing something else first. In December, Beverly told me that the OSC had issued a temporary cease trade order against Holt Capital Advisory. 2 further complainants had come forward, both in their early 60s, both introduced through former romantic partners of Marcus's. The combined alleged losses were significant. The investigation is ongoing. I won't speak to what I don't know for certain. What I know is this. Sophie has her money. Patricia and I have ours. And Marcus Holt is currently dealing with the particular attention of people who are very good at their jobs, the same kind of work I did for 26 years, the kind that moves quietly until it doesn't. I've been thinking, since all of this, about what I'd say to someone who found themselves where Sophie was recovering from one difficult chapter and suddenly hopeful about the next one, vulnerable in that specific way that isn't weakness, but that certain people have learned to recognize and exploit. Here's what I know. A legitimate financial advisor will never create urgency. Real investment opportunities do not expire in 72 hours. The pressure of act now or miss out is not a feature of ethical investing. It is the oldest manipulation in the book, and it works precisely because it short-circuits the careful thinking that would otherwise protect you. A legitimate advisor will always have verifiable credentials. In Ontario, you can check any registered financial advisor through FSRA and the OSC in under 5 minutes. It costs you nothing. If someone resists this verification, if they get offended that you'd check, if they make you feel that checking is an insult to the relationship, that resistance is the most important information they've given you. When someone asks questions about your assets before they've earned the right to, that is not curiosity, that is reconnaissance. The questions a predator asks early in a relationship are not small talk, they are inventory. And finally, trust the people who knew you before the new person arrived. Not because they're always right, but because they're not looking at you through the lens of what they want from you. Sophie trusted her instincts enough to write me a note. That note made all the difference. We do not have to face these things alone, and asking for help from people who love you is not weakness. It is, in fact, the most rational thing you can do. I kept that note. It's folded in my desk drawer, next to the commendation I never look at. I look at the note sometimes. Dad, something's wrong. Don't sign anything, please. She trusted me. The least I could do was be worth trusting.